I still remember the laughter when I couldn't read the math problem on the board. It echoed through the room like a wave crashing over me, unstoppable and cold. I froze there, holding the chalk, staring at symbols that meant nothing to me. My cheeks burned. Mr. Harris sighed loudly and said, "Maybe next time someone prepared can try." I heard someone in the back whisper, "She's so dumb, it's painful." That moment planted something inside me, something small and sharp. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was shame. And shame grows. Every day after that felt like walking into a battlefield. The classroom buzzed with low whispers and sudden bursts of giggles whenever I was called on. I'd stare at my notebook, praying to be invisible. One time, I raised my hand, just once, and I heard a girl behind me say, "Oh, she thinks she knows something now." Everyone left. Even the teacher smiled a little. I pretended not to hear. I stopped raising my hand after that. I stopped trying to participate at all. I started to believe maybe I was stupid. The hallway was worse. It was like a tunnel I had to survive twice a day, once before class, once after. Lockers slammed like warning bells. Some boys started calling me D-minus. Others would ask mockingly, "Did you forget how to spell your name today?" Sometimes I'd hear the sound of paper ripping and find my homework torn and stuffed into my locker. No one ever said it was me against them, but it felt like it, and not just the kids. The teachers never said anything. Not once. Their silence was permission. Even in the lunchroom, I wasn't safe. I'd sit alone at the far end of a table next to the wall, where I could pretend I didn't mind the isolation. I'd eat fast, with my head down. Sometimes they'd throw bits of bread or balled up napkins at me and laugh. I never told anyone. What could I say? That I was being humiliated daily while the adults in the room looked the other way? That the noise in my head was louder than all the shouting? I convinced myself I deserved it, that if I were smarter, more normal, this wouldn't be happening. I had this little spiral notebook where I used to write random words I didn't understand from class. Words like hypotenuse or metaphor. I'd write them down and stare at them, hoping they'd make sense one day. I never told anyone about that notebook. It was my secret hope. But one afternoon, it fell out of my backpack and someone picked it up. They read a page out loud in a fake voice, like I was an idiot trying to be smart. "Oh, look. She's trying to learn." I grabbed it and ran. I didn't stop running until I got home. I ripped the notebook apart that night. At home, it wasn't much better. My parents worked long hours. When I told my dad I was struggling in school, he just said, "You need to focus more." My mom said I should stop being dramatic. I stopped talking about it. There was no space for weakness. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the day like a movie I couldn't escape. Sometimes I cried, quietly into my pillow, trying not to make a sound. I knew if I kept being like this, I wouldn't go far, but I didn't know how to change. I began pretending I was someone else. I'd imagine I was a girl who understood everything, who gave the right answers, who had friends that waited for her after class. It was childish, I guess, but it got me through some days. Then reality would crash back in. A wrong answer. A snort from someone behind me. A smirk from the teacher. I started counting the days left until graduation. It felt like a prison sentence. I was just trying to make it out alive, even if I was invisible by the end of it. Sometimes I wonder what hurt more, the cruel words, or the way they were said so casually, like they were facts. Like I was stupid and that was just how the world worked. Like my name and failure belonged in the same sentence. I didn't know it then, but those years were shaping something inside me. Something I didn't yet have a name for. It wasn't strength. Not yet, but it was the beginning of it. The raw, aching beginning of someone who would one day stop apologizing for being different. People thought I didn't care about school, that I was lazy or just didn't try hard enough. But they didn't see the way the letters moved on the page when I tried to read. How I could look at a sentence 10 times and still not know what it meant. I thought maybe I was cursed. I didn't know what dyslexia was. No one talked about it back then. I just knew I was different and not in a good way. When the teacher asked us to read aloud, I'd panic so hard I couldn't even see straight. I wasn't dumb. I was terrified. Report card days were like execution dates. I'd sit at my desk all morning knowing what was coming. I already knew the grades D, F, maybe a C if the subject was less word heavy. But seeing them printed, signed, handed out in class like a public record of who mattered and who didn't, that destroyed me. Some kids cheered when they got theirs. I folded mine in half before even looking. Then I'd spend the whole walk home wondering if this would be the time my parents finally gave up on me. My mom didn't yell much. She just looked disappointed, like I had embarrassed her. That hurt worse than shouting. My dad, on the other hand, would say things like, "Do you even want a future?" Or, "At this rate, you'll be flipping burgers forever." Sometimes I'd cry and say, "I tried," and he'd snap back, "Then try harder." It never occurred to them that I was trying. That every day at school was like climbing a mountain with no gear, no help, and people throwing rocks at me the whole way up. I started dreading mornings. Getting out of bed felt like walking into fire. I faked stomach aches, fake colds, anything, to buy myself one more day of peace. But I always went back. There was no escape. My anxiety got so bad that I'd feel dizzy just walking into a classroom. My palms would sweat, my chest would tighten, and sometimes I'd feel like I couldn't breathe. I didn't know that was anxiety. I thought maybe I was just broken in ways other people weren't. Mr. Callahan, my history teacher, made things worse. He had this smug way of asking me questions he knew I wouldn't get right. "Maybe you'd know the answer if you paid attention instead of daydreaming," he once said in front of the whole class. I wanted to scream, "I do pay attention." But I didn't. I just sat there, cheeks burning, trying not to cry. I don't think he knew how much power he had. Or maybe he did. Either way, he made me feel like someone not worth teaching. There were good teachers too, but even they didn't see the full picture. They thought I was shy, maybe insecure, but never suspected there was something deeper happening. No one asked real questions. No one said, "Hey, maybe she's struggling in a way we can't see." I became a master of hiding, smiling when I needed to, nodding even when I had no clue what was going on. Faking normal became its own subject, and I got straight A's in that. What no one understood was how hard I worked in silence. I'd reread things over and over at home. I'd copy textbook pages by hand just to try and make sense of them. I had notebooks full of scribbled definitions, half-finished assignments, and reminders to stay awake or breathe. I wasn't lazy, I was drowning. But to everyone else, it looked like I didn't care. It killed me inside to be seen like that, like I was giving up, when in truth, I was fighting harder than anyone realized. The worst part was the growing feeling that maybe they were right. That maybe I really wasn't meant for anything better. I'd hear other kids talk about college, careers, big dreams, and I'd just sit there silent, pretending to listen. I stopped imagining a future for myself. I couldn't picture it. I couldn't even picture getting through the next week. I lived day to day, head down, heart heavy, carrying the weight of every F like a scar no one could see. I didn't know it then, but that invisible weight would eventually become my fuel. There came a point when I just stopped going. I told my mom I felt sick, and she barely questioned it. After all, it wasn't unusual. I'd been shrinking into myself for months. One day became two became a week. I stayed in bed until noon, watching the same old ceiling, trying to feel something, anything besides dread. I didn't miss school. I missed who I used to think I could be before I realized I wasn't smart enough to get there. The silence was a relief at first, but it started to feel heavy, like the world had forgotten me. And honestly, I was okay with that. I don't know if I really wanted to disappear, but I didn't want to keep showing up just to be torn apart. I imagined quitting school altogether, getting a job, vanishing into the kind of life no one asks questions about. It seemed easier than waking up every day to fail in front of everyone. The idea didn't scare me, it calmed me. Like maybe I could stop pretending to be something I wasn't. Like maybe I could finally stop hurting. That was the scariest part, how normal that thought started to feel. I hadn't checked my messages or emails in days. I ignored the calls from school. I barely left my room. But one morning, something strange happened. I heard a knock at the front door and didn't bother getting up. Later, when I finally dragged myself to the hallway, I saw a small envelope on the floor. My name was written on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened it slowly. Inside was a folded note. Just one line, written in neat, careful letters. The world would be less without your voice in it. No name, no signature. Sat on the floor for a long time, just staring at that note. It didn't fix anything. It didn't change how broken I felt. But it made me cry, really cry for the first time in weeks. Because for someone to write that, someone had to believe I mattered. And if one person believed that, maybe there was still something worth holding on to. Maybe I wasn't invisible. Maybe not completely. That one sentence pulled me back just enough to breathe. Just enough to think, maybe I'll try one more. Straight up the next day, I forced myself to go to school. I kept my hood up and my eyes low, but I walked through the doors like a ghost. No one noticed I'd been gone. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. That was fine. I wasn't there for them. I just needed to know I could survive walking back in. I went straight to the library, not ready to face a full classroom. That's when I saw her, the school librarian, Miss Keller. She looked up and smiled like she'd been waiting for me. "Welcome back," she said softly, like she meant it. She didn't ask why I'd been gone. She didn't push. She just offered me a chair behind the desk and a cup of warm tea. I didn't even know librarians could do that. I sat there for over an hour, just holding that cup and listening to the quiet hum of the library. She didn't fill the silence with questions or pity. She let it be. And that made it feel safe. It was the first space in a long time where I didn't feel stupid. I didn't feel like a mistake. I felt human again. Before I left, she handed me a small book. It wasn't a textbook or even something academic. It was a journal. Write anything, she said. Even if it doesn't make sense, especially then. I took it not really knowing why. I didn't tell her about the note I'd received, but I wondered if it had been her. I never asked. I didn't want to break whatever magic had reached me that day. For once, not knowing felt better than the kind of knowing I was used to. That night, I opened the journal. My hand hovered over the first page for a long time. Then slowly, I wrote one sentence. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm still here. It wasn't profound. It wasn't brave. But it was true. I was still here. And somehow, that started to matter again. Not to impress anyone. Not to prove anything. Just for me. That was the beginning, not of a victory, but of a pause, a breath. A small, fragile decision to not give up yet. I didn't go back to that school after that year. I barely remember the last day. No goodbyes, no celebration, no closure. I just stopped showing up. Eventually, the school stopped asking. I got my GED a year later, quietly, with no ceremony, no cap and gown, no proud smiles. Just me in a testing center, breathing deep and walking out with a piece of paper that didn't erase what had come before. But it did prove one thing: I hadn't given up. Not completely. And that small proof became my first building block for everything that came next. We moved shortly after. My mom got a job offer in another city, and I didn't argue. I packed up my things in silence, leaving behind the house that had held so much confusion, so much ache. The new city wasn't magic, but it was unfamiliar, and that felt like a gift. No one knew me. No one had seen me fail. I could walk into a coffee shop or a bookstore without hearing whispers. For the first time in years, I could just exist without the weight of my own history pressing down on me. I started working at a small diner downtown. Nothing glamorous. I bussed tables, refilled coffee, wiped down counters, but I liked it. I liked the rhythm of it, the routine, the simplicity. I liked that the people there only cared if I showed up and did my job, not what my grades had been. I liked the feeling of being useful. It was the first time I felt like I belonged somewhere, even just a little. One of the cooks, Elena, noticed how I watched everything she did in the kitchen. "You've got good hands," she said one day. "Ever thought about cooking?" I hadn't, but once she said it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started staying after my shift just to help out in the kitchen. At first, I just chopped vegetables and cleaned up, but soon she let me try small things: sauces, prep, seasoning. It was like something inside me woke up. Cooking made sense to me in a way school never had. It was messy but forgiving. It was structured but creative. I could taste progress. I could see results. For the first time, learning felt like joy instead of punishment. I saved up and bought my first knife set, then a stack of secondhand cookbooks. I'd stay up late, flipping through recipes, watching online videos, experimenting in our tiny apartment. Kitchen. I burned things, ruined pans, made awful messes. But I also created flavor. I made things that made people close their eyes and smile. That reaction, it was like a grade, but better. It was a connection. A kind of communication I'd never been able to manage in a classroom. I was still learning, but this time I was choosing how. The more I cooked, the more I wanted to share. I started an anonymous food blog. I didn't expect anyone to read it. I just needed a place to put my thoughts, my recipes, my failures and discoveries. I wrote the way I talked to myself, honest, clumsy, sometimes funny, sometimes raw. To my surprise, people started reading. They left comments. They shared their own stories. It grew slowly, but steadily. For the first time in my life, people were listening to what I had to say, and not just listening. Responding. By the time I was 22, I had enough saved to start offering small cooking classes from my apartment. Just a few people at a time standing around my kitchen island, learning how to make the things I once thought only professionals could do. They weren't just learning recipes, they were learning with me. Some of them were just like me, people who had been told they weren't good enough, smart enough, capable enough. We laughed a lot. We burned things. We got better together. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous, but I was proud. For the first time, I felt like I had built something real, not on anyone else's terms, on mine. The world that once felt so rigid and closed had begun to open, piece by piece. And I'd opened with it. I didn't need a classroom to grow. I didn't need a diploma to matter. All I needed was the chance to begin again and the courage to keep going, even when no one was watching. Especially then. It started small, like most things do. A friend from my cooking class asked if I'd cater her sister's birthday. I almost said no. I didn't feel ready, but something inside me whispered, try. So I did. I stayed up for 3 nights planning a simple menu, prepping every detail in my cramped kitchen. It wasn't perfect. I forgot napkins. The cake melted a little. But people smiled. they came back for seconds. At the end of the night, someone asked if I had a business card. I didn't, but I said, not yet. And that was the moment something shifted inside me. I made a name, Quiet Flame. It felt right, something about how I'd always worked. Quietly in the background, slowly finding my fire. I designed the logo myself using free apps, set up a website, and posted menus with photos taken on my old phone. I wasn't trying to go viral or get rich. I just wanted to feed people with care. I started offering meal prep services, home dinners, even small office lunches. Every new client felt like a door opening, and I stepped through each one with a mix of fear and wonder. Of course, nothing was easy. I had no investors, no formal training, no guide. I burned dishes, missed deadlines, lost money. Once, I delivered a lunch order to the wrong office and cried in the elevator all the way down. I second-guessed myself constantly. Was I doing this right? Was I good enough? But then someone would message me, "Your lemon chicken reminded me of home," or "My daughter finally ate something green, thank you." Those little messages were gold. They kept me going when the doubt got too loud. I learned fast. Not because I'm naturally smart, but because I paid attention. I kept notebooks, not for grades, but for lessons. How to store ingredients better, how to price my meals fairly, how to say no when I needed to. Every mistake became a teacher. Every success, no matter how small, felt like a personal revolution. I was learning more from grocery store runs, late-night recipe tests, and panicked last-minute changes than I ever did in a classroom. And this time, I wanted to learn. Eventually, people started talking. Someone wrote a short blog post about my food. Then a local paper did a feature. I was stunned when they asked to take my photo. I almost said no. I still didn't feel like someone worth writing about. But when the article came out and I saw my name in print, something inside me softened. I wasn't the stupid girl anymore. I was a woman with a business. A woman who fed people and made them feel something good. That realization was quiet but powerful. I never told my parents everything. Not yet. My mom knew I was working hard and seemed proud in her own quiet way. My dad still sent job listings sometimes, just in case. That used to hurt. Now I let it pass. I didn't need their full understanding to keep going. I had my own proof. I had returning clients, full kitchens, and a growing list of meals people asked for by name. Success wasn't loud for me, it was steady, gentle, something I could hold in my hands and say, I made this. The most surprising part was how many people told me they related to my story. I'd get emails from strangers who'd been told they'd never amount to anything. Some wanted to learn to cook, others just wanted to say thank you for being real, for not pretending it was easy. I answered every message. I remembered how alone I had felt, and I didn't want anyone else to feel that way. My business wasn't just about food anymore. It was about voice, connection, healing, even if it started in a frying pan. Sometimes, after a long day, I'd sit in my kitchen, lights low, apron stained, feet sore, and I'd smile. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was mine. My life, my pace, my rules. I didn't need applause. I didn't crave recognition. What I had was enough. A flame that never went out, even when no one believed in it. Especially then, that was the quiet kind of pride that filled me. Not loud, but deep. And it kept me moving forward, one small, strong step at a time. It started with a few likes on a photo I posted, a simple shot of one of my dishes, nothing fancy. Then more people began following my page, sharing my posts, commenting with encouragement. I thought maybe this is just a small ripple, but it grew. Slowly, my cooking, my story, my quiet voice began to reach farther than I ever imagined. Then came a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years, an old classmate. The same kid who used to call me Deeminess was suddenly telling me how proud he was. I didn't know how to respond that the messages kept coming. Some were heartfelt, others awkward, and a few downright insincere. "Sorry for being so cruel," one read. "I didn't know what you were going through." I remembered the whispers in the hallway, the laughter in the classroom, the way they made me feel invisible and worthless. Now, here they were, asking for forgiveness like it was a casual favor. Part of me wanted to let it go. Another part wanted to scream that they never deserved my time. It was a tangled mess of surprise and bitterness. Scrolling through my social media, I saw faces I hadn't expected. People who had teased me, who had ignored me, who had written me off as a failure. They were watching now. Some sent private messages asking how I'd gotten here, what had changed. They wanted to reconnect, to rewrite the story they had once helped write in such painful ways. I wondered if they realized the weight their words carried, or if it was just a convenient memory for them, one they wanted to erase quickly. I couldn't help but flash back to those moments, the hallway lockers, slamming, the smirks when I stumbled over a sentence, the way Mr. Callahan deliberately picked on me during class. It all came rushing back in sharp, painful bursts. I wasn't the scared girl anymore, but those wounds were still raw beneath the surface. How do you forgive the people who made you feel less than human? How do you erase years of shame and silence? With a few messages typed on a screen. One evening, I sat alone scrolling through a message from someone who used to be one of my closest friends. They said, "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you. I was scared too." I typed a reply, then deleted it. I wasn't ready to forgive. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. But I was starting to understand that their apologies weren't about me. They were about their own regrets. And that realization gave me a strange kind of peace. I also felt angry. Angry that it had taken so long for them to notice. Angry that I had wasted so many years believing their words. Angry that the school that had ignored me now wanted to claim me as a success story. That pride I'd felt building quietly inside me suddenly clashed with the bitterness of being ignored for so long. I was caught between two worlds, the girl who had been broken and the woman who was finally whole. But despite the anger, I was learning to hold space for all of it. The surprise, the bitterness, the hope. I wasn't a victim anymore, but I was still human. I had the right to feel conflicted, and I had the right to set boundaries. Some messages I answered, some I ignored, some I saved for later. I was learning that healing wasn't linear, it was messy, complicated, and deeply personal in the end. What mattered most was that I was still here, still growing, still building my life on my own terms. Those old voices could no longer control my story. I was writing it now. And if some of them wanted to be part of it, they would have to prove they deserved a place. For the first time, I was no longer running from my past. I was standing in front of it, and I was ready. The email came late one evening, just as I was about to close my laptop. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I stared at the screen, rereading the words over and over. "We would be honored if you would accept our invitation to be the keynote speaker at this year's graduation ceremony." My heart slammed in my chest, but the voice in my head screamed, "This can't be real." I sat frozen, unable to move or breathe properly. Was this some kind of cruel joke? The same school that had ignored me, ridiculed me, now wanted me to stand in front of all those people and speak. I read the email again, carefully this time, looking for hidden meanings or traps. The principal's name was there, official and formal. The words were respectful, almost warm. They spoke of my journey, my perseverance, my success beyond the classroom. But all I could think about was the years of pain, the laughter, the whispers, the cold shoulders. How could they suddenly want me? After all I'd been through? My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, confusion. What were they really after? Redemption? Recognition? Or something else? I kept scrolling down, reading the names of teachers who had signed the letter. A few I recognized, some who had been indifferent or even cruel. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream at them, "Where were you when I was drowning?" But instead, I felt numb. The flood of memories came crashing back, and I barely recognized myself. Could I stand in that same place and not break? Could I speak without my voice shaking? My mind raced between saying yes and running as far away as possible. The night dragged on, and I couldn't sleep. I imagined every possible scenario. What? Would I say? Would they listen? Would they laugh? Or worse, would I crumble? I felt like a child again, scared and small. But somewhere deep inside, a different feeling was stirring. A stubborn flicker of courage that said, "This is your moment. This is your story to tell." The invitation wasn't just from them, it was from me. A challenge I hadn't dared face before dawn the next morning. I showed the email to my closest friend. She didn't hesitate. "You have to do this," she said. "Not for them, for you." Her words echoed in my mind, shaking loose the doubts that clung to me. It wasn't about forgiveness or proving anyone wrong. It was about owning my past, my pain, my triumphs. I realized this was more than a speech, it was a reclaiming. A chance to stand tall where I'd once felt small. It scared me, but it also ignited something I hadn't felt in years: hope. For days, I wrestled with the decision. Saying no felt like hiding, but saying yes felt like stepping into a spotlight I wasn't sure I deserved. I imagined their faces, their whispers. Would they see the same girl they had torn down? Or would they see the woman I'd become? What if the memories overwhelmed me? The doubt was suffocating, but I knew running away would never make the fear disappear. Sometimes bravery wasn't a feeling, it was a choice. Finally, I opened my laptop and started typing my reply. I accepted. I wrote it simply, clearly. "Thank you for this opportunity. I will be there." My hands trembled as I hit send. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was mine. I wasn't doing it for them or for the past. I was doing it for myself. For the little girl who had sat frozen in that classroom, wishing to be seen. For the woman who refused to be invisible any longer. As the days passed, I prepared quietly. I practiced my speech alone, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing. I felt the old fears bubble up, but I didn't let them win. This was more than a ceremony. It was a reckoning. A moment to show not just the world, but myself, that I was more than the scars they left behind, that I had the strength to stand and speak, that I was finally ready to be heard. Walking through those school doors again felt like stepping into a time capsule filled with every memory I'd tried to bury. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the scent of worn-out books, and polished floors hit me like a wave. Hallways stretched out, lined with lockers that once felt like walls closing in on me. Each step echoed in the quiet corridor, dragging ghosts of the past behind me. But this time, I walked tall. My shoulders were squared, my head high. I was here on my own terms, not the scared girl I used to be. I paused outside the old classroom, my fingers brushing the doorframe. I remembered sitting in the back, shrinking smaller with every whispered insult. The desks, the faded posters, the peeling paint, they all whispered stories of failure and fear. But now, those whispers felt distant, like echoes from someone else's life. I could almost smile, thinking how far I'd come. The girl who once couldn't read the board was now preparing to speak in front of the whole school. The transformation felt surreal, but it was mine. As I walked the halls, flashes of old faces flickered in my mind, the ones who had laughed, who had ignored me, who had judged without knowing. I could hear their voices, the taunts and the sneers. But alongside them was a new soundtrack, the soft murmur of confidence building inside me. I rehearsed my speech silently, tasting the words on my tongue. Every sentence was a thread weaving together my past and my present, a bridge from pain to power. This was my story, raw and real. In the teacher's lounge, I bumped into Miss Keller, the librarian who had been my unexpected ally. She smiled warmly, as if no time had passed. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. I felt a surge of gratitude and a pang of old vulnerability. Then Mr. Callahan appeared. His expression was unreadable. I thought about the hurt he caused, the words that still lingered in my mind, but I didn't recoil or lash out. Instead, I nodded politely. I had no need for confrontation. My silence was my triumph. The bell rang, and students poured into the hallways like a tide. Some glanced at me with curiosity, others with recognition. I caught the eye of a few former classmates. I wondered if they remembered the girl they once dismissed. I wondered if they saw the woman standing there now, steady, poised, unbroken. I didn't seek their approval. I was no longer invisible. I was visible, undeniable. And that was enough. Sitting in the auditorium, the room that once felt like a cage now seemed vast and open. I stood backstage, clutching my notes, heart pounding but steady. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to outrun myself, trying to disappear, and now, here I was ready to face it all. The fear hadn't vanished, but it had shrunk. It was a quiet companion, not a master. I took a deep breath and stepped into the light dot. As I walked to the podium, the faces of the crowd blurred, but their energy was clear. This was no longer a room filled with judgment, but with possibility. I opened my mouth and spoke not just words, but my truth. I spoke of struggle and resilience, of pain and hope, of being underestimated and rising anyway. Every sentence was a victory, a reclaiming of my voice. The silence that followed was heavy but filled with meaning. I had overcome not with loud defiance, but with calm strength. Afterwards, as applause washed over me, I felt something new. Peace. Not because the past was erased, but because I had made peace with it. The place that once crushed me had witnessed my rebirth. I wasn't just a survivor, I was a woman who had turned her scars into stories, her wounds into wisdom. And in that moment, I knew this was only the beginning of everything I was meant to become. Stepping onto the stage, my hands trembled slightly, but my voice was steady. I looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, many strangers, and I knew this moment wasn't about proving how far I'd come financially or professionally. It was about something deeper. I told them about the nights I cried alone, the crushing weight of feeling invisible, and the endless battle to believe I was enough. I spoke of how pain and struggle don't make you less, they make you human. We all learn in different ways, I said, and sometimes the hardest lessons don't come in a textbook, but in the courage to keep going when no one's watching. As I spoke, I saw tears glistening in eyes across the room. Students, teachers, even those who had once been my harshest critics. Some of the old bullies sat quietly, faces softening, shoulders loosening, as if my words had unlocked something they hadn't dared to feel before. I didn't shy away from my truth or the scars I carried. Instead, I made them visible, loud, undeniable. The room held its breath between sentences, and when I finished, the applause wasn't just polite, it was a wave of recognition, empathy, and respect. In that moment, I wasn't just a graduate, I was a voice for everyone who had ever been overlooked. Leaving the stage, a few people came up to me, their hands shaking, eyes wet. One of the former bullies, a boy who once called me the dumb girl, looked me in the eye and whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't know what to say at first, but then I smiled softly and said, "Thank you for listening." That night, I realized that truth isn't just spoken to be heard, it's spoken to heal. And sometimes it takes standing in the light of your own story to finally be free. I never wanted revenge. I never dreamed of proving anyone wrong just to spite them. What I wanted, what I've always wanted, was respect. Respect to be seen for who I really am, not the mistakes or the struggles they assigned to me. That respect didn't come from their words or apologies. It came from me. It was born in quiet moments of perseverance and the choice to keep moving forward even when the world seemed determined to hold me back. I found my worth not in their acceptance, but in my own unshakable belief that I mattered. Walking away from that school for the last time, I felt something I never thought possible. Peace. The walls that once trapped me now stood as silent witnesses to my journey. I wasn't the frightened girl hiding in the shadows anymore. I was a woman stepping into her own light. My steps were steady, my heart calm. The past was not erased, but it no longer controlled me. I was free, not because the world had changed, but because I had. That freedom was mine to carry, no matter where I went next. Looking back once more before turning the corner, I whispered to myself, I wasn't invited back because I was lucky. It wasn't chance that brought me here. It was my refusal to quit, my stubbornness to keep fighting, even when no one believed in me. That fight was invisible to most, but it shaped everything. I learned that true strength isn't about being perfect or winning trophies. It's about rising each time you fall and walking your path with your head held high. Now, I live for me. Not to prove a point, not to silence old voices, but because I deserve to. My story is mine, messy and beautiful. I carry my scars as badges of honor, reminders of battles fought and won in silence. And if I walk away, I'm not just leaving a place, I'm stepping into the life I was always meant to live, free, whole, and unbreakable.